Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Berechot, chapter 3, Halacha 5. Now, the Mishnah is going to get into talking about how a Keri who has not yet immersed himself should recite certain obligatory prayers. Now, the Mishnah says, if he was standing in prayer, saying the Shemona Esrei, and he remembered that he was a Keri, he should not stop praying. Rather, he should shorten each of his blessings. Now, I want to point out what the Ritva says about this. He's saying that he says only an abbreviated version of the beginning of each of the blessings, and the Mishnah and the ruling there is limited to certain situations. Now, just as an aside, the Gemara is going to come and explain what are those situations later. Now, the Mishnah is going to talk about a case of a Keri who went to immerse himself in a mikveh shortly before the time of saying the Shema was about to pass. Now, we know that you have to say the Shema by a certain hour or it doesn't count as saying the Shema. It counts as a biblical recitation, which is very nice, but as a counting of the mitzvah of saying the Shema itself, does it count? No. And so here he is, he's about to go do it, and the time to say the Shema is about to pass. What do you do? The Mishnah says he went down to immerse himself in a mikveh. If he's able to go up from the mikveh, cover himself, and recite the Shema before sunrise, he should go up, cover himself, and recite the Shema. But if he is not able to do all this before sunrise, he should cover himself with water and recite the Shema. Now, this is a case where the Mishnah is addressing somebody who's trying to say it at the right time. This would be in the Vasikin. These are people who are really devoted, and they are like pearls and treasure to Kodesh Baruch Hu. And this is not necessarily talking about somebody who's wanting to say it just before the latest time for saying the Shema would apply, but it would also count for that person as well. The Mishnah is using the optimistic case and is using the case of the Vasikin who is trying to get it done at the right time and at the latest point of the right time, the optimal time to say it, and how does he handle it. But of course, this would also apply for the lazy person who has the obligation about to expire. Really, there's no difference. It's just that the Mishnah is taking the most optimistic case. Of course, it's always amazing to try to pursue being a Vasikin. Now, the Mishnah is going to talk about, regarding, the latest time for the morning Shema. And Rabbi Eliezer states that it must be recited before sunrise, and Rabbi Yeshua says that it is recited until the end of the third hour of the day. Now, it looks like this anonymous Mishnah is reflecting the view of Rabbi Eliezer because it dictates the unpreferred method of covering oneself in water for the sake of saying the Shema before sunrise. And this method is not ideal by any measure. And if so, it would emerge that the halacha would follow Rabbi Eliezer in keeping with the rule that the halacha follows an anonymous Mishnah. So this would be really a big chiddush. But what about Rabbi Yeshua? Now, we know that, in fact, the halacha does follow Rabbi Yeshua, who's going to permit the Shema until the third hour. Now, that's why I say that this is talking about, the Vasikin who's trying to, hurry up and, do it at the right time so he doesn't miss it. Now, if he doesn't say it at the right time and he says it, he still, of course, gets the credit of, doing the Shema and saying that, and getting the mitzvah. But did he say it at the optimal time? Well, it's kind of like the difference between, a glatt kosher steak and just a kosher steak. It's still kosher, still very good, but it's not a glatt kosher steak. So this is, somebody who's trying to do the mitzvah in the choicest manner. It's also why, you get a better etrog, stuff like that. The Mishnah is going to continue. It's going to say, however, he may cover himself with he may cover himself neither with foul water nor with steeping water until he puts water into it. So I want to point out what's going on here, that the Rashi is pointing out in the parallel that water in which flax or canvas has been soaked is going to be bad smelling. And I want to point out that the Haredim says that the Mishnah seems to mean that he may not recite the Shema in the foul-smelling water until he adds enough clean water to nullify the odor. However, since the Mishnah deals with a large quantity of fetid water, it would be impractical to add the required amount of clean water, and it would be especially difficult to do so in a short amount of time before sunrise. So the Bavli, says the Haredim, explains that the Mishnah, as if the words of being like urine and steeping water, the Mishnah is teaching us two laws, says the Haredim. One may not cover himself with putrid water or steeping water altogether, and if one is near a vessel containing a small amount of urine, he may not say the Shema until he puts water into it. And the Gemara is now going to define how much water needs to be added to the urine. I had an interesting case yesterday. My father-in-law is actually in the hospital, and there was a guy who came into the shul in the hospital in a wheelchair, and he had an open catheter. It was a catheter, but it was sealed, but it was out in the open and it was filled with urine. And I was wondering about the ability to pray and all that. So if somebody's in the hospital, you have to check the halacha carefully. This stuff does apply even today, because in the case of a hospital, I saw it 2 days ago with my own eyes. Now, the Mishnah is going to continue. It's going to say, how far must one distance himself from them or from excrement before reciting the Shema? And that's 4 amos. And by the way, it says in Devarim 23:14, it says, you shall cover your excrement. And this is derived that, reciting sacred words is forbidden in the presence of uncovered human excrement. And it says, on the next part of it, so that your camp shall be holy. And how far would that be? That would be a 4 amos thing in either direction. And that's going to be what it is. Now, by the way, for somebody who is called to a bet din and does not go to the bet din after being called 3 times, it's like the person is human excrement, and you're also not allowed to go within 4 amos of that person as well. That person who doesn't go to the bet din basically has the same status. You're not allowed to stand within 4 amos of him. The Gemara is going to continue, and it's going to say that the Mishnah's ruling that a person was saying the Shemona Esrei, and if you remember that he was a Baal Keri, does not need to stop praying, and that rather he shortens the blessing. Now, the Gemara is going to qualify this point. The Gemara says that the Mishnah speaks of a Baal Keri who is praying in public, and it continues, it says, but if he's praying by himself, he should not stop immediately, and that accords with Rabbi Meir, who maintains that a Baal Keri may not vocalize rabbinic blessings, such as those of the Shemona Esrei. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who allows a Baal Keri to vocalize rabbinic blessings, even if he is praying by himself, he should not stop. And the preceding applies where he has no water in which to immerse himself. Now, the Brisa here is recording a parallel dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about the blessings of the Shema, and this is again a very, very small nuance. It is limiting it only to a dispute to where one does not have water. Now, what does the Haredim say about this? How do we understand this from the Haredim? The Haredim says rather he should continue to vocalize the entire text. In fact, the Gemara's wording that he should not stop is imprecise. For Rabbi Yehuda, allows a Bali Keri not only to finish Shmona Esrei, but even to start it in the first place, just as he allows a Bali Keri to start other rabbinic blessings. And the Gemara says he does not stop in order to parallel Rabbi Meir's opinion that he should stop, says the Haredim about this. Now, the Gemara continues and it says, but if he does have water in which to immerse himself, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees he should stop praying immediately. In other words, says the Pnei Moshe, if he's privately praying, he should stop immediately. But when praying in public, the considerations of human dignity allow him to continue, even if water is available, and even Rabbi Yehuda agree with that. And the reason is we care about human dignity. And that's a key idea in Judaism. Now, the Gemara is going to talk about the law of a sick person in relation to Ezra's enactment and what's going to be happening there. And it's going to say, in the case of a sick person who cohabited, these rulings were stated. Rabbi Ami said, if he deliberately caused himself to become a Bali Keri, in other words, he actually cohabited, let him immerse himself and die. That is, that even if immersion would be harmful for him, he is not allowed to study Torah and pray before immersing himself in a valid mikveh, since he caused the problem to himself in the first place. In other words, Rabbi Kanievsky in his Beur shiurim says, thus he may not study Torah or pray until he is well enough to immerse himself. And why would that be? Because he basically brought this on himself. So that's the point by Rabbi Ami. He basically, for a thing of self-gratification, brought this problem onto himself. Gemara is going to continue. It's going to say, but if he became a Bali Keri involuntary and he imagined in a dream that he cohabited, we do not trouble him to immerse himself. In other words, says the Pnei Moshe, he need not immerse himself in a mikveh of 40 seah, but he does have to wash himself of 9 kavin of drawn water. Now, again, about this, that this was the leniency for a sick person, 9 kavin of drawn water. That's for a sick person. And why would that be? Because for the drawn water, you might be able to warm it up a little bit, and you can take it out from the well or something like that. And going to a mikveh might be very hard for somebody who's sick. And where it's talking about, say, somebody washing themselves in a shower with like 3 luggin of water, the case for that is where they went into a cave where there's kind of stagnant, foul water. They went into the mikveh in this cave, and they want to wash themselves off from this foul water. Now, the point of washing the 3 kavin of the water, okay, is not a religious thing. It's a practical thing, right? He wants to get this bad, icky algae water off of him, okay? The act of going into that cave water is what religiously and spiritually purified him. The pouring over of the water does not purify him. It doesn't do anything. But the rabbis imposed a stricture on this, on the 3 kavin of water, because Amoratzim, who don't learn very much, wouldn't be able to tell the difference, and they would think that if you poured water over yourself like a shower for 3 kavin, that's going to be in fact what is cleaning you. And that is why they impose that the person who goes and does it and still pours the 3 kavin of water is still going to be a sheni latuma for handling things like kodshim and truma, so that you basically are creating a fence, and the sages are allowed to do it. And in fact, it's one of the smartest fences you can imagine, because Amoratzim would look at this and they'd get confused, and you'd have a bunch of fools running around saying a woman can go pour 3 kavin of water over themselves and be clean. And I saw this one guy do it at a mikvah and then, handle kodshim, things like that. And that, saying that a shower is gonna be okay. That is not okay, and in fact, it's misleading the public, and it's something that's said out of being an ignorant idiot. The dissenting opinion is going to be over here that Rabbi Chagai, in the name of Rabbi Alva Bar Zavda, says either way, we do not trouble him, even if he cause himself to become a Bale Keri, a sick person does not have to immerse himself. And then the Gemara is going to talk about a third view. And it says that a sick person who deliberately cause himself to become a Bale Keri needs 9 kavin of water to be poured on him, and a healthy person who deliberately cause himself to become a Bale Keri needs an immersion in a mikveh of 40 seah. And if a sick person became a Bale Keri involuntarily, we do not trouble him even to shower in 9 kavin. So about this, says the Pnei Moshe, that the summary of views regarding a sick person becoming a Bale Keri, you have Rabbi Ami, who says that 40 seah are required for a deliberate mission, 9 kavin for an involuntary one for the sick person. Rabbi Chagai, who says 9 kavin are required in either case, and a brisa saying that 9 kavin are required for a deliberate mission and nothing for an involuntary one. Now, the Bavli is over in 22b, is going to conclude in favor of a different opinion, which is going to require 40 seah for a deliberate omission and nothing for an involuntary one. Now, the Rashba is going to say that there's another brisa that requires 9 kavin for a sick Bale Keri, and presumably one whose omission was deliberate, since that is a standard case. And it adds that 9 kavin suffices only to let him pray for himself, whereas in order to recite prayers for the other, he needs 40 seah. And the Gemara continues, and it says, if a healthy person became a Bale Keri involuntarily, he needs to shower in 9 kavin. Now, regarding this mission, the Gemara now is going to discuss another situation in which a Bale Keri does not have enough time to immerse himself before this deadline for saying the Shema. And we're going to finish it up at that point, and then we're going to go on to another section in the Mishnah tomorrow. Now, the Gemara continues, says, Rabbi Zevadiah says, the son of Rabbi Yaakov Bar Zavdi, says in the name of Rabbi Yonah, and you note here that it's pointing out the tradition, the chain of transmission. The Gemara is always going to point out chains of transmission, and it also has rules on the pointing out of the transmission, that you don't need to keep doing it all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Gemara is going to continue, is going to say that if a Bale Keri is in a city whose spring, which is basically going to be the nearest mikveh, is going to be very far away, he first recites the Shema, then he goes down in the mikveh, he immerses himself, he comes up and he prays and says the Shemona Esrei. In other words, what this is saying is that he's allowed to say the Shema before the immersion, because if he would immerse himself first, he would miss the time for the Shema. But regarding the Shemona Esrei, which can be said later, it must be delayed until after the immersion. Now, this case is going to be legally equivalent to one in which the Bale Keri lacks water for immersion, and that's going to be the mechanism for why he's allowed to say the Shema and vocalize it. That's the trick here, okay? Now, there's going to be a related law. If he is a cold person, in other words, he's very, very sensitive to the cold, and even, by the way, different case, this mikvah is even going to be very close to you, okay? The Gemara is going to say that the rabbis treated him like one who lives in a city whose spring is very far away. The reason why is because it's difficult for him to immerse himself early in the morning when the temperatures are extra low from the night. And basically the rabbis are allowing him to say the Shema and wait until the day warms up the water, and then immerse himself and say the Shemona Esrei later. And basically, they're treating this as if that he doesn't have water, because by all practical measures, he doesn't have water. He can't go into the mikvah because he will get sick from the cold water. Anyway, the Torah is very precise, and the Torah is filled with concern for the well-being of every Jew. Have a great day.